So this is a presentation that's a little bit more geared towards what do we have around here versus what kind of fleshy animal do we have. So we don't have, the museum can't keep all the native animals on reserve. So we do have a few select ones that you guys will be able to see up close and be able to touch. But we're going to be looking at the different groups of reptiles, not just snakes, but also turtles and lizards. And hopefully give you an idea of not only how to recognize things, but also like, hey, I didn't even know that was around here. But even then, I only stuck to common animals in this area of Virginia, and I didn't even show all the little bit more obscure animals that you may have to go out and actually actively flip a log to go see or anything like that. So I also have Tom here, who's helping me. He's from around here, and he's been a long-time snake catcher, so he's definitely going to jump in with some quotes about some of the things that he's seen. And then we have Nick, who's going to be showing the animals around while we're talking. So feel free to jump up and ask questions if you have them. So I'm actually going to get started with the presentation on what is not native. And you're going to see these slides a couple times because there's a lot of confusion about what is here and what is not here. So we don't have crocodilians technically. We do have some that get found every single year, people releasing them as pets. They're illegal to own in Virginia as a pet, but people still wind up bringing them up from Florida and then dropping them off in ponds. So these are really, they come really close to Virginia. What is the river that they're in? Anybody? Everyone? No? Okay. There's a river that's pretty close to Virginia where they're found in.
Isn't it Alligator River?
See?
Yeah.
I was throwing you guys a softball. So we're going to get started with turtles. Everybody likes turtles, and we actually have quite a few of them here. And we have a pretty good diversity of them as well. So we're going to start with the box turtle. I think this is universally recognized. A lot of people do still get it confused with a lot of different other turtles. What makes a box turtle is the fact that he can close up inside of his shell. There's a hinge right here that can close and conceal his head, and he can conceal all of his legs. So there's nothing an animal can really grab. Messy turtles usually. So surprisingly, there aren't that many turtles in the world that can do this, that can close themselves up inside of their own shells. Most of them still have their face and arms exposed, that if a predator was really good at it, they could probably still dig in there. These guys, they're of special concern to me because people pick them up as pets, and then they wind up withering and dying in captivity. They also get hit on roads a lot because they're they're the only turtle that we have that's primarily land in existence. They're not as land oriented as say tortoises are, but they're the only ones that live happily on land and pretty much only go in mud puddles and stuff like that. You can touch them. So with any reptile, since this is the first reptile we're bringing out, when you touch the shell, it's made out of keratin, which is the same thing your fingernails and your hair is made out of. And that's actually a living structure. It's not some type of inorganic thing that just gets shed and it's sitting out there. Despite it being just like our fingernails, which we really don't consider living, that is pretty close to living. It's being grown from underneath and being moved out. So that's the reason why they look kind of shiny sometimes, is that they're just as shiny as our hair and fingernails. So there's a lot of confusion between turtles, tortoises, and terrapins. This is an example of a tortoise, and if you go other places in the world, that definition changes, because I think in Britain they call everything a terrapin. And then I know in other parts, other English-speaking parts, it's something they'll reverse it. And then in other languages, like I think Spanish, it's all of them are just called turtle. So we typically reserve this for these super land-dwelling animals that are fine being well away from water. There's also a genetic lineage of what makes them a tortoise. So when you see these guys that are upstairs in the viper room, very large shell and big elephantine feet is what they call them. That's pretty typical of the tortoise. Spotted turtle. This is there's a exhibit of these upstairs, and Viper people also have one out on display. Yeah, this one is kind of given for scale. It gives you an idea. That's a full-size spotted turtle that will fill your hand, but that's pretty much as big as they get. They're very popular in the pet trade. Unfortunately, poachers will go out and literally strip every single individual out of a population and send them out for the pet trade. And subsequently, the state has made these illegal to possess as pets unless you're grandfathered in. I read a book that was published in the 20s over at the CNU library that said that these were the most abundant turtles in Virginia. And I think that's a matter of perception that they're quite common in ditches. They're aquatic turtles, but they don't have heavily webbed feet. They tend to paddle along the bottom and then come up for air. So I think that with them wanting to live in ditches, and we had plenty of ditches back there, it just seemed like there were spotted turtles everywhere. But that still goes to show that so many people can go their entire lives and live here and never see one, but yet they used to be so common. The good old snapping turtle. I had to use a cute one. You know, these guys are really, really bulky. They're built like tanks. They don't have that great of a reputation, and I think it's a little unfair because our exposure to them is entirely on land. We've never gone in the water and swam with them and interacted with them that way. People are always afraid of snapping turtles biting their toes off or something like that. When they're in water, they're very comfortable there. That's exactly where they want to be. When they come out on land, when we see them, they're doing one of two things. Females are coming out to lay eggs, and males and females are usually migrating, trying to find another pond to live in. But they're not in water when they're crossing roads and stuff, so they're scared. They're like, hey, I'm not in the place where I can go and swim away from these guys, from a potential predator. I really need to be on the defensive. It just so happens that the mechanism that they use for catching fish, which they need to be able to snap their head out really fast, is also really good for deterring predators. And they can be kind of scary when you're trying to get them off the road and they're lunging at you. They have a lot of weight. But for the most part, if you work with these guys from the back end and push them along, if you can get past your nerves, you know, flinching back when they go to snap at you, you can deal with these. I've never known anybody really get bitten by a snapping turtle unless they really did something stupid. But if you get them in the water, I've seen video of people standing in a wading pool wiggling their toes, bare toes, in the pool with them, and the snapper doesn't care about the wiggling toes. It doesn't matter because they're in water and they're comfortable there. To give you an idea, this is what the babies look like. They tend to have disproportionately long tails. When I've seen them like on the road, I always thought they looked like baby horseshoe crabs because it was just one big shell and a big long tail coming out. They tend to be really dark, and they're really sweet at that age, of course. And a lot of people do keep them as pets until they get a little bit bigger. I've seen some people that keep them as pets and they are perfectly fine. They don't really snap at people because they get handled so often. So this ugly mug holding the turtle there is our state herpetologist. But this is a record. The snapper was caught by a trapper. It's legal to kind of fish for snappers. So this is the largest one that we've come across, 51 pounds. The shell was measured as 18 inches. As with any fish story, people tend to exaggerate the size of snakes and turtles, but this is the largest one that we've ever recorded, so they don't get any bigger than this for the most part. Perhaps 400 years ago would have been a different story, but 50 pounds is pretty old max. Do you still have one out on exhibit?
No, he's not out on anymore.
There used to be one that was only 30 pounds, and that was massive. It was abnormally large compared to any other snapper you've seen, and that was still only 30 pounds. So I can't imagine what a 50-pounder would have been. And to give you an idea of what is not native, we do not have alligator snappers. Now I know it's confusing because you're a snapping turtle, and then with the prefix alligator snapping turtle. This is the alligator snapper that's more native to the Mississippi drainage basin. It's actually not that far away from Virginia, but the ones you've seen on TV, the gigantic ones that, you know, get over 100 pounds, that's an alligator snapper. They look much more primitive than our guy. And you'll also notice that their shell tends to have these ridges. They also have this really hooked beak, and that's because they're they're sit weight predators waiting for fish, and they want to be able to catch that fish. But you know, size here, that's not a big alligator snapper, but if you look at the average weights, there's a pretty big difference there. I don't know why, it's a matter of perspective. I don't know why this guy's foot is so large like that. It must be an ankle or something. Or he's wearing a snapping turtle hand. Painted turtle, there's one up on exhibit right across from where the spotted turtles are. This is one of our most colorful turtles that we have. And one of the ways to identify it, you see a lot of turtles that we have that have a lot of yellow stripes in their heads. It actually helps them with kind of blending in with the waves in the water when they're at the surface. But it's the only one that has yellow on the head and then red. No other turtle we have has red stripes on it. And the other big way to tell the difference between them is they tend to have these white bars that goes across the top of the shell. A lot of people, especially these are right out here on this lake, a lot of people will look at the spotted turtles with the average length of 6 inches full size and compare them to the other turtles that are out basking and think that they're baby turtles. That's just, there's different species and they get the different sizes, and they tend to be found quite a bit with other much larger turtles. Now, of course, there are going to be baby turtles of the other species out there as well, but these guys are the only ones with a red and yellow. And this is abnormal. I've seen these before. They're typically described in the textbooks as having a yellow bottom shell. But the ones I've seen sometimes, like out in Gloucester, they have that bright, deep red and orange color. So there's a lot of variability in that. So you often find painted turtles basking out with red-bellied cooters, and these are very abundant around here. And you see that they actually don't have that much of a distribution, but I think they're in Virginia. But they are very common in southeastern Virginia. They also have red, but they only have red on their heads like that. So these are the, oh, I say, yeah, yellow. These are the largest of the basking turtles. So we don't count snapping turtles as the largest because they don't usually climb out on logs nearly as much as these guys. So we count these as basking turtles. They get literally as big as dinner plates, pretty decent size. And I thought that one up there was interesting how she found her way up there. It's like, well, that's a good way to escape from predators because if something comes along, she can drop really fast and get away. The other thing that's interesting about these is that not only are they the largest, but they tend to dip into being herbivorous. Can anybody tell me what herbivory means as opposed to carnivorous? There you go. What is it?
Eats plants.
Eats plants. So almost all turtles love to eat a worm. They will go nuts over chasing a worm. They will not turn down a worm. But these guys have decided, hey, there's a lot of algae or duckweed that's growing out there. There's other aquatic plants that I could be eating and take advantage of. And so turtles are known for having beaks, which tends to be just one big ridge that meets. But you notice they've actually kind of got buck teeth right here. And they have a serrated beak, and that's for chopping through, trying to cut the leaves and the vegetation. So it's at some point in the evolution of turtles, they said, I don't want teeth, I want a beak. And these guys said, I kind of want my teeth back, so I'll just modify my beak. That's the way to look at it. So there are some other turtles. Now these are all confusing. No one's going to expect you to really be able to identify these, but I want to let you know what some of these other ones look like. We have a couple different sliders, and they're called sliders because they slide off of logs pretty easily. We have our native yellow belly slider, which has a big yellow S-shaped stripe on it, and the one we've got shows that pretty well. Now the other one is, you can see by the scientific name, you got Trichini scripta. They're fairly closely related. They're subspecies of each other. But these are generally found in the Midwest, closer towards the western part of the United States, middle western. And these are the red ear sliders. They're called for the big red blotch behind over their ear. They're very popular in the pet trade, and they were the typical dime store turtles that everybody sees. So they're shipped all over the United States and all over the world, and you can find these everywhere because people got tired of them as pets and released them, and then they established themselves. So the problem with this is that not only do they compete with the yellow bellies And these guys tend to have an attitude. That's my personal experience. These guys are very aggressive. They'll punch the other one in the head to get to your food type of thing. Here he goes. Do you see the big yellow stripe on the side of his head? That's pretty typical of them. Until they get older, they tend to get a little bit darker. So not only are they out competing for food, but they're also diluting the genes, because you can see how closely related they are, that when they breed, you wind up with a yellow belly and red ear hybrid. So they're no longer separate subspecies like they used to be. So this is one problem with releasing animals into the wild. Yes, ma'am?
Are they heavy?
They are heavy. What do you, about 3 pounds or something like that, 3 or 4 pounds?
If that, I mean, yeah. Well, I think
83.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd say, yeah. So they got a little bit of weight to them, especially since they're covered in bone. That kind of adds to it as well. They're also notice if you notice here, they're highly domed. I'm not sure where that particular picture was taken, but especially the turtles that have to live in the same place where alligators live tend to have a more highly domed shell, and that's so that when the alligators try to crunch down on them, they have a little bit more structural strength to resist it. And there's a lot of pictures. You can look for turtles in alligator pictures, and there's always an alligator upside down, an alligator's mouth, a turtle upside down, an alligator's mouth, and supposedly they can survive sometimes with that. Any questions on that? Okay. So we have a diamondback terrapin. It's the only turtle we have in the United States that is native to brackish water. So we have turtles that like fresh water. We have sea turtles that like salt water, but these guys are right in between. They're in the estuaries. And they are somewhat common out in the Chesapeake Bay. But this picture shows you the size difference, what we call sexual dimorphism. 2 different shapes. This is a full-size female, and this is a full-size male, although the males can get larger. And that's how big they are, and somehow they have to figure out a way to mate, even though they're a pretty big difference in size. So the females definitely get larger in most turtles that we have around here as well. So you also notice that these can be really colorful and pretty. I mean, if you look at this one has a lot of white into it. They tend to have these concentric rings on their shells. So they're a very attractive animal, and the same thing happened with these guys as with the spotted turtles, that the state made them illegal to possess just because so many people were pulling them out of the wild. If you also notice when you get a good close look at them, is that they don't tend to have the big scales that the other turtles do. They're actually somewhat scaleless, except for kind of the outside of their arms where they might need the most protection from predators. And it also has gigantic back feet. I mean, look at the size of this male, and he has the back feet there. And that's because, unlike the freshwater turtles we have, they have to be able to paddle against currents. So they have to have a little bit more bigger feet in order to paddle their way if they want to go somewhere else other than where the current is going. You've always heard stories about turtle soup. That's what these guys were used for. Right around the early 1900s, they were harvested quite heavily, and as you can imagine, over-harvested, and they were nearly depleted. In fact, they over-harvested so much that the market dropped out of them that you couldn't get them anymore, and so they're people didn't expect to be able to find turtle soup in restaurants anymore. So they're making a comeback, but unfortunately we're hitting them with something different. And one study in New Jersey, up to 15,000 terrapins die in crab traps. Now, being reptiles, they have to breathe air. And so if you throw a crab trap in the bottom, it's basically a funnel trap they can swim into, but they can't swim back out very easily. They have to come up for air every 5-10 minutes or so, and they wind up drowning in the crab pot. So this came out of one crab pot. This one unfortunately had poor exposure, but you can see it's full of turtles. The problem is that the males are always in pursuit of females. If you have a hole in that crab pot that's big enough for a female to get into, and all the males go chasing after her, then you wind up with 1 dead female and 15 dead males. So that's one problem with the crab traps. And sometimes they just throw them out on, sometimes when they wash up, you see some of the ghost traps wash up, there will be turtle shells in there. But there's a couple of different organizations like the Wetland Institute in New Jersey and also our VIMS in Gloucester that are working on trying to get not only fishermen to willingly to include this is a turtle excluder device. It actually is small enough to keep turtles, especially the females, from swimming in, but still big enough for crabs to get in. Trying to get them to use this. It only costs like, I think, 40 cents a piece or something like that. And if they can incorporate that, then we can eliminate the 15,000 dead turtles every year. So of course there are also a lot of sea turtles. I won't get into them because we don't really see them a whole lot, but to let you know that we do have a lot that come into Virginia. Loggerhead is the one that we have on the tank upstairs on display. It's a fairly common turtle, if you can say sea turtles are common, and it's really the one that nests in Virginia. The other ones typically are just visitors. If anybody remembers, I think we had a new species nest in Back Bay last year for the first time. It was Kemp's Ridley or one of the other ones. So we're going to get into lizards. It's a little bit cumbersome because so many of our native lizards look the same. But what doesn't look like any of our other native lizards is the green anole. That's also called the American chameleon because they can kind of change colors, although not nearly to the extent of a regular chameleon. These get, you can see just like with a lot of other animals, it comes really, really close to Virginia, but not quite. Well, you will see them, like if you go to Home Depot or Lowe's, other garden centers, they get shipped from the southern states with potted plants, and then they jump out once they get here and they move around. But typically cold winters, and I would expect this particular winter would be pretty good at killing them off. So they're not really establishing themselves. So some people tend to be a little surprised that they're not native. We have the fence lizard, one of my favorites, great personality on them. And the one up top is the male. And the male always wants to be able to advertise, hey, I'm the biggest and best male you can possibly mate with. And usually bright colors do that. But if you look at this picture here, this is actually a female. She has a bolder pattern to her. And the male, who's a little bit more bland, is on the bottom. That's not typical at all for the animal kingdom. Instead, the male's colors that he wants to flash to other males and the females is on the bottom. So, if you're a blue lizard, don't you think you would stand out to, say, birds and stuff like that that want to eat you? So he's hiding. He's literally hiding his colors. And he has the ability to show them off when he wants to. Here's one other thing before I move to the next slide. They typically have this posture, especially on pine trees, and they blend right in with pine bark, the little tiny panels of pine bark. And if it's backlit, you can't really see them until they move. So it's pretty interesting how just curving your head back a little bit while you're propped up on a tree gives you an advantage that you can hide from predators just because you look like bark. So here is a video, not the best quality video, but it shows you the behavior of a male fence lizard. He has the blue underneath, and we will never ever see it. But other fence lizards on the same level will be able to see it. I promise it will. Yes. Oh. They had like some Eye of the Tiger audio. Had to get rid of that. That was horrible. Jesus, you gotta push it to the limit. Well, he's doing these push-ups. He's doing push-ups. So when he's up against the ground, nobody can see the blue that's on him. But when he is doing push-ups and he's raised up off the ground, you can see the blue. And that's exactly what he's doing. So there's no other better way to demonstrate their behavior than having it. And they just do that all day long. Push up, push up, push up.
It's too funny.
So I decided to throw all of our closely looking skinks in one slide because there's really no point talking about them separately when for most people they're all going to look the same. There is no such thing as a blue-tailed skink. I know the tendency of people want to describe the animal. And the thing is we have different species, and they all look the same as juveniles. So this is when, either when they hatch out from the egg or shortly thereafter, they typically all have blue tails, black body, and these light stripes. It's when they get older is when they look a little bit different. And to be able to tell the difference between some of these involves counting the scales along the top of their lip, or counting the rows of scales on the bottom of their tail. That's the way, when we have them in hand, that's the only way we can really tell the difference between them. So I just want to let you know that all the ones that you see scurrying around your house, they're not salamanders. which I hear a lot of people confuse them with, because they're very, very shiny. They, these skinks, they have actually little bony plates infused in their scales on the outside, and they tend to not have overlapping scales like a lot of snakes will overlap. These guys, the scales are matched end to end, and so and then they have a glossy finish. So they tend to look a little wet or slimy like a salamander would, but they're actually reptiles. For the most part, you don't see salamanders running fast and climbing on walls of people's houses in the middle of summer. So the first one that we saw on the other slide, this one right here, can grow up to look like one of these guys. So this is a male, and it's called a broadhead skink for a reason, because they do this male combat. These guys are interlocked, and you can see this guy has a lot of scars on the back. This one has a little bit. These are modified to have these huge muscles. That's what makes them a broad head, is the fact that they have to have muscles and muscle attachment points in their jaws so they can bite other males that much better. So this bottom shows a full-size female. I'm sorry, this is the female and this is the male to kind of give you an idea that as they grow up, they can tend to get browner, but there's still a big difference in the size of her head versus his. We don't get to see broadheads very often. I would imagine they're probably locally abundant. If you go to some spot, you can see them around. But this was actually on one of the Herp Society surveys. Pocahontas State Park is where we saw these guys. Yeah, they're definitely on the bigger side. In contrast, we have a little brown skink. And the reason why I throw this on there is that if you ever go taking a walk on a trail in the woods, and let's say it's fall or spring or a warm day in winter, as long as it's slightly on the warm side, and I've even seen them out when it's 50 degrees, you can almost hear these things skittering around in the leaf litter. You'll hear something move, and you look and there is nothing there. And it's probably these little guys running away from you. And they just have this little tiny head to them, and they're just always running. And these guys, they look a lot like salamanders. It would be very easy to confuse them, but they're very fast runners. They're hard to catch too. Yes?
What do those guys eat?
Little bugs.
Termites, ants,
yeah,
little tiny spiders.
Yeah. Yeah, because even then, so they're small and they still don't even have that big of a head to fit large prey. So I said we were talking about lizards. So what is this thing doing up here? Can anybody explain what's going on with this slide? I mean, we're talking about lizards, but you can clearly see this is a reptile without any legs. What do you think? You think it's a snake, right? Because it's a reptile without any legs. Right. And that's perfectly understandable. But I want to blow your minds right now and tell you that we have lizards that are native that don't have legs. And in fact, they're quite common in some other parts of the world. They're found in Europe and Australia. And some of them have little, basically what it is, they're a lizard that decided to burrow in the ground a lot. Your shoulders get in the way, so you might as well go ahead and get rid of your legs. You don't need them on the ground anyway. But some of the lizards still retain the little flappy legs on their back legs. They're just like little nubs, little scales, and that's where they haven't quite lost all of their legs. So we have a slender glass lizard. I think we have two different glass lizards in Virginia. This is the more common one. Yes, ma'am?
Would they ever evolve to the point where we would call them a snake one day?
See, that's where it gets a little complicated. You can have something and call it snake-like, but the problem is that when you look at the genetic lineage, these branched off from lizards a long, long time ago, but snakes branched off from lizards even further back. So going back a long time, snakes have been going their own route for a long time. These guys have a little bit more recently been lizards. And I'm about to explain to you why they're still very much lizards. So this is a good close-up of the eastern glass lizard, and we were actually talking about this yesterday. Burrowing animals tend to have their bottom jaw slightly recessed because if you're trying to push through the ground, you don't want your mouth filling up with dirt. So most burrowing animals have an overbite. So if I were to take any of the pictures of the skinks that I showed you earlier and only showed you this part and had it right beside another skink, you really wouldn't be able to tell the difference between this and any other lizard. It's only because you were able to see the rest of it that made you think that it was a snake. But from this part forward, it's very lizard-like, and I'll tell you why. It still has an eye that blinks. Snakes actually have a scale that cover their eye. They never ever blink, and when they shed their skin, that part of their skin comes off with it. It's very advantageous when you're digging through dirt. You can't use your eyes very much, and if you're trying to close your eyes and not get dirt in it, it makes a problem. So snakes have done away with eyelids altogether. The other thing is snakes don't have outer ears, and they don't have middle ears either. But these guys still have an ear hole right there. You can still see it. And then another weird thing that's not common to all lizards. This is actually a groove along the side of their body. Is there a glass lizard on exhibit by any chance?
No, not anymore.
Okay. I'll try not to put you on the spot for animals you don't have on exhibit.
Sorry.
What's interesting about this is that when you're touching any of the other snakes, they're kind of flexible all the way around, and when they breathe, their entire body will expand at the same time. These guys are very hard. They're very strange if you're ever used to holding snakes. They're very strange to hold because they're stiff and they're rigid, but the body is actually made like this. You have a top half and a bottom half, and in between is this expansion joint, and that's that groove right there. So when they breathe, their body has to kind of move like that. It's kind of like two shells on top of each other. But if you ever catch what you think is a snake and it ever blinks, then you know you have a glass lizard. And any herpetologist would be thrilled to catch one of these. They're great. But the problem, I guess I should have used tail falls off. Well, I was about to say is that the reason why they're called glass lizards is that their tail breaks off so easily, and their tail comprises about 2/3 of their body. I can't tell on this particular animal, but I'm willing to bet that the butt end of them is about right here, and the rest of this would be tail, and they would use that tail to try to get away from predators, so it breaks off pretty easy. So we try not to catch them, we just want to take photos where they are and not mess with them. So that's a good little segue into snakes in Virginia. We had one snake-like lizard. So I'm going to give you a second to read through that. So I want to point out this last part that I bolded. There's really not a whole lot that's different about snakes other than the shape of them. Sure, they've got some pretty nasty stuff they can bite you with. Some of them can. But there are venomous animals in other parts of the animal kingdom, especially with mammals. Believe it or not, there's quite a few venomous mammals. So it's not entirely unique. When I used to work here, and I would take animals to the vet, so I'd have like a box with a snake in it, and some old lady in the waiting room, what have you got in there? Thinking I've got a cat or something. Because you have to put cats in a box. I would say it's a snake, and I think it's sick, and she wouldn't believe that I would be taking a snake to the vet. Like, they can get sick. They're vertebrates just like us. They have the same lineage through fish and amphibians and other reptiles as us. They have lungs, they have livers, they have everything else that we've got. It's just that they're in this big long tube. So we have a good little display upstairs talking about the difference between venomous and non-venomous snakes. We have a pretty good rule that works well in Virginia, where the venomous snakes have a vertical slit, just like a cat. So when they're in bright light, that slit tends to get a little bit smaller, and when they're in darkness, it will open up so they can see a little bit easier. All of our non-venomous snakes have round pupils. So to give you an idea, we have 3 venomous snakes in Virginia, but we have 30 to 34 other native snakes that are non-venomous. So there's way more non-venomous snakes that really are never going to hurt you than compared to the venomous snakes. So of course the one that a lot of people recognize and is most common in Virginia is the copperhead. It's the only venomous snakes you can find pretty much statewide. On the peninsula here, they've been kind of killed off over the decades, and so they're either absent in this area on the peninsula or not very common at all. You pretty much have to go up to Williamsburg to reliably find copperheads. So these guys are obviously adapted to blend in with leaves. They are an absolutely gorgeous snake. They do vary from orange. What kind of color variations have you seen here, Tom?
Anything from a solid wash of something from a deep orange to a light orange color, to more on a beige color, And then in some places out towards the central part of the state, some of them are even washed over a little bit with almost like some slate blues and some salmon and mauve paint coloration. They're extremely variable, and there are some really, really pretty ones out there.
What about temperament? Because I hear a lot of things about copperheads being really nasty, but everyone I've encountered, for the most part, has been just willing to sit there and wait for you to go away.
Yeah, snakes in general, any animals on the planet, they all have their own disposition. So
So copperheads are not different in that manner.
They're correct. Yeah, one animal could just have an absolutely nasty attitude, but you know, other animals out there could be completely laid back, and it's no different than. Well, I won't go there with the dog analogy thing, but yeah.
If you catch a juvenile trying to cross a street, he might be a little bit more nasty because he knows he's out in the open and exposed, as opposed to being in leaves and underneath the forest canopies.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah. They're stand up because there's probably something else I'm going to get into here in a minute. If you're not going to cover, are you going to cover juveniles?
No, go ahead.
Okay, so snake's comfort level is kind of directly proportional to how safe it feels. If you approach a snake and it's backed up against a tree or up against a log and you're approaching it this way, it's going to stand its ground if it doesn't feel like it has somewhere to go. So if you see any snake in the wild, the best thing to do, you know, keep your distance. If you don't know what kind it is, just kind of sit back and watch it, let it do its thing. It may take a while, but eventually, if it seems like it's fired up, some of the rat snakes that we have around, they'll actually rear up in kind of an S shape, and they might open their mouths and hiss and you know, make a ruckus. But give them some time. Eventually, they'll calm down. They won't feel threatened, and they'll slither off and do their thing.
There's a juvenile picture right there.
So yeah, so with copperheads particularly, in the wild, if you see a snake and you think maybe it's a copperhead, maybe it's not, I'm not sure. If it's anything other than pretty much a full-grown adult, if it's a juvenile, if it's a brand new baby, the surefire way to know for a fact that it's a copperhead, because this is the only snake that does this in Virginia. If you follow the snake's body, this is juvenile, I can tell, because if you start at the head, you follow the body around, and it comes down, and you'll see this little hook here, and this is part of his tail. This is the end of this baby copperhead's tail, and it's bright yellow. It looks like, you know, almost like a little worm, and I've seen footage of the babies. They'll sit, because they're not really fierce hunters at that size. There's, you know, a newborn copperhead is maybe only about this big. So at that size, they eat things like frogs and maybe small insects, crickets, things like that. So what they do is they coil up, and then their tail is usually in the center, almost like a cinnamon bun. So the tail pops up at the bottom, and they have, that little section of the tail only being not even maybe a ½ inch long, the flexibility of the musculature that they have in there is absolutely ridiculous. So what that little tail thing does is it wiggles around. It looks like a worm sticking its head up out of the ground. What that does is that will attract a small frog that thinks it's a worm, or a small bird or something. So that bird or frog comes down thinking that's a bug, and they bite onto the tail, and the snake, you know, surprises them, hello, and bites them, hits them with the venom, and then within a few minutes, that animal dies. The snake tracks it down and finds it and has it again.
Yep. And then we also have, go ahead.
Do snakes eat, like, do they eat vegetables?
No. There's some that will eat it accidentally when they swallow their other animals, but pretty much no snake is going to go around chomping on leaves or anything. Yes, sir. Forgot your question?
Snakes, rats.
Yep.
Yes.
They eat all that stuff that we don't want around us.
Frogs and birds.
So we also have timber rattlesnake. We do have a geographic variation that's called a canebrake rattlesnake, which would be this one that's found around here with kind of the brownish stripe going down it. There's one of these on display, and I think Viper has a couple of them. So you can see here, even the eye, even though it's not pointed at the end, it's still not at all circular. So you can still see that this is a venomous snake. Out in the mountains, you can find some that are pretty dark. And of course, these guys have rattles. There's nothing inside of a rattle. What actually makes the noise is there's just loosely linked sections of scale that they've shed, and when they rub up against each other, they make a rattle type lure. So there's nothing floating around inside or anything. On the peninsula, the only place you're going to find these is at Sandy Bottom Nature Park or in the woods around it. And I did ask the Sandy Bottom nature people how often they come across them. Once or twice a year. They're on the park all the time, and pretty much joggers have never reported any sightings there. So you can still go about your business there, and they really want to stay hidden anyway. So close relative to the copperhead is the cottonmouth. We do have these at Newport News Park, the big one. If you go all the way up to the end where the swamp bridge is, you can find those. Sometimes they're right on the trail, and they do have signs out there giving you some information about them. So they're known for giving an open mouth threat. Almost any animal, if you can imagine like a dog snarling, they're going to expose their teeth and let you know what they have. This is kind of a universal threat, and cottonmouths are trying to do their best to show you, hey, don't step on me, please don't mess with me. I probably have something that can mess you up, but I'm going to give you a chance anyway. So that's how they got their name, because it's typically all white inside. Some of them do have the yellow tail as juveniles, and I'm going to get in a little bit more information on how to tell the difference between the cottonmouth and the water snake. So we do have some of these out on display, right? The water snake. So these are one of the most common snakes you're going to find in Virginia. You can reliably find these in almost any body of water throughout Virginia. A lot of color variation. It's kind of hard to have people understand that yes, they can be plain nothing brown on top, but still have all these colors mixed in. And also the colors of these guys depends upon whether or not the snake is wet or dry. So that doesn't help either. So highly variable in coloration, but pretty much any water around here you see a snake drop in, it's going to be a northern water snake or one of the other closely related water snakes. And I really like the belly scales over there. Got some pretty good patterns on them. So if you have two snakes in the water that really kind of look similar, how do you tell the difference between them? One is the range. With cottonmouths, no matter what people tell you, they're not going to be found any further than Newport News and another subpopulation in Henrico County. They are not found anywhere else north of that. So you hear about people from Pennsylvania, New Jersey, swearing up and down they have cottonmouths. They're also called water moccasins, by the way. But no, they do not occur that far. What they are looking at is probably the northern water snake. So if you're out here, chances are you're seeing a northern water snake. So when they do kind of resemble each other, especially when you don't have, let's say, a cottonmouth in your hand to compare the snake with. It's not exactly easy to see the difference between them, so that's what I'm going to try and help you out with here. One that's really easy, if you ever see a snake swimming along and the water is here and the head is out, but the rest of the body is trailing behind, that's going to be the non-venomous northern water snake. The cottonmouth has kind of an elongated lung that he uses as kind of a flotation device, so he will mostly swim at the surface of the water. He does have the ability to go under it, but the fact that he has most of his body out is a pretty good indicator that it's going to be a cottonmouth. In my opinion, this is my own personal observations from this area of Virginia, is that when you see a water snake that has this reddish or orangish color into it, it typically is going to be a northern water snake, and if you see yellow, it's going to be a cottonmouth. I've seen some specimens that have been the opposite of that, but it's been something I've noticed quite a bit. If I see a little flashing yellow, it's going to be a cottonmouth. Some other venomous species that are not found in Virginia, we do not have coral snakes. They do come up to the southern part of North Carolina, and even then they're not easy to find. We don't have diamondback rattlesnakes. We only have the timber rattlesnake. And pygmy rattlesnakes, they scare me because they are really, really tiny. You can see a quarter per scale. They do get bigger than that, but they're still really tiny rattlesnakes. But they're a couple hours drive away from here in North Carolina. They're not in. All right, this is one of my favorites. We do have a couple of these out on display. The eastern hognose, we have a western upstairs in our venomous versus non-venomous. Highly variable. You can't predict the color they're going to be. They're going to be orange. They're going to be highlighter yellow. This crazy color. And another common color is, unfortunately, a lot of them are solid black, so it kind of confuses the whole, when people talk about black snakes, what is a black snake, and so many of them are black in color. These guys will not bite you. If you smell like a toad, yes, they might bite you. If you smell like a ham and cheese biscuit, they might bite you. We've had that happen before. So I have a video that's going to play. It's narrated. It's from Tennessee, so the narrator is going to have a little bit of twang to them. But I want you to see what they do instead of biting.
This is a 2.5 foot long eastern hognose snake, so named because of its upturned snout. Hognose snakes are found throughout the eastern United States in wooded or old-field habitats. Their coloration pattern is highly variable, ranging from brown and black blotches like this one to almost uniform black coloration. His underside is pale. The hognose is also known in some areas as a puff adder because of its habit of raising up and flattening its head and neck when disturbed, giving it a cobra-like appearance. It often hisses, shakes its tail like a rattlesnake, and lunges at its oppressor when disturbed, but it virtually never bites.
If you
If
keep
this
poking
puff
at
adder
them,
routine does not convince the threatening human or animal to leave it alone, the hognose will go into its second line of defense, that of playing dead. First, it rides around like it has been hurt. Then it rolls over on its back and plays dead, with its mouth open and tongue out. This is just an act designed to get the oppressor to leave it alone. However, if you turn the snake back upright, it immediately rolls back into its fixed position like standing to a duck. Apparently, the hognose believes that a dead snake has to be laying belly up, so when pretending to be dead, it assumes its position. It cannot be convinced otherwise. No matter how many times you turn it upright, it's going to roll over on its back, mouth open, tongue out, like dead. This snake deserves an Academy Award.
so those are really great animals just because they have that spectacular behavior that no other snake we have around here does. And you can, if you find one of these in the wild, you might get pooped on, but you can still pick them up without any worry about them biting. I will pay you $100 if one bites you. Just look me up. So we have the common black rat snake, also called an eastern rat snake. We keep changing names on everybody. This is one of the most common ones that we've got around here. And you're going to see them climbing up in barns and things like that. They leave snake sheds and attics and everything. They're pretty common. I'm going to go over some other lookalike species for them. But also note that the juveniles, they start out with this gray with a black blotch pattern, and as they get older, they turn blacker and blacker. And they're not the only species that does that either. They are found statewide, although in some parts you might be able to find other black-colored snakes a little bit more common than these. Anything fun to add about them? I've always thought that the coloration on the sides, they had these black stripes in between their labial scales. It looks like their teeth are exposed.
With your smile. Not necessarily about them. It's very, very common for people that I know when they say, they think it's a rattlesnake, because you're probably going to get to this at some point, that these guys, as adults in particular, as babies too, this one here is doing, it's the, I don't know what the word is that I'm trying to think of, but when you're very small, you want to bark a lot. You want to create a lot of fear and whatever it is. So typically you'll run across a baby that's this size, and with any provocation whatsoever, they'll pop up and they'll hiss and they strike and they flatten their head out. Here's a good example. You were probably getting to at some point here. You can
This
see
guy's exhibiting a triangular head. It's a non-venomous snake that will not hurt you, but yet he is flaring his neck out. So the triangular head thing really doesn't work.
But they're very commonly mistaken for people think it's a dangerous, venomous rattlesnake, because these snakes, while they don't have a rattle on the end of their tail, the end of his tail, this one, it looks like maybe it's coming up in here somewhere. It just comes right to a point. There's no rattle on the end. But if they're in dry leaf cover, or even some animals in captivity I've seen, when they get agitated, will specifically put their tail up against something and rattle it a lot, and it makes a noise, and it sounds like a rattle. So that for other animals with ears, it still is meant to create
Yeah, you get dry leaves. It sounds every bit like a
a
rattle.
warning.
Especially if you're not around rattlesnakes all day to know what it really sounds like. So another one that looks just like it. Oh, here's one. They have an amazing ability to climb. The same muscles they can use to constrict their prey with, they can use to climb. And so this guy's going up a vertical trunk like this, and he's kind of got that wavy pattern. Sometimes when you come across one and he's got that wavy kinked body, you know it's going to be a black rat snake as opposed to one of these guys, a black racer. You can see, I mean, at a glance, you can't really tell the difference between this and that guy. The big difference is his name is Racer. He moves supernaturally fast, then you know that it's a racer. They also, if you really corner them, they have the ability to flatten sideways. You know, hognose will stretch out more like a cobra. These guys can flatten sideways, and they go side to side. They're trying to get away from you, so they go side to side. So I'm not going to go over the exact details because it gets really picky about how you can tell at a glance the difference between them. But these guys tend to be kind of a matte finish, so not very shiny, and the black rats tend to be a little bit on the shiny side. Like I said, if you were to walk up to one, then he would kink his body and kind of wait for you to go away. This guy would just pick up and go. You don't even hardly see him move. He's just a black line.
Something else about these guys I've noticed in my experience out in the field, they have an incredibly high heat tolerance to the point that it still astonishes me every time I see one in the heat of the summer, in the middle of the day, when it's 95 degrees out, and you're near a road and hot pavement, something you would never ever consider taking your shoes off and walking across in your bare feet. I've seen these guys moseying with nowhere important to be, just doing their own thing slowly, just poking across that screaming hot pavement. On the really, really hot days of the summer, these guys are active. They're out in the open. They're looking for food. They're doing their thing. The black rat snakes, on the other hand, it's too much for them. They shut down. They'll find shelter, shade, cool.
The black rats like to eat, as you can imagine, rats, mice. They also eat their fair share of birds. These guys tend to be a little bit different. You'll see them eating frogs and also other snakes. That's not at all uncommon. But another animal that eats snakes is the king snake. And we have another one we're going to bring out. So this is an example where he has found a garter snake, and he has coiled around him, and he is in his death throes, unfortunately. Being a herpetologist, you don't want to see snakes fighting each other. They got enough problems up on their own. But this is black colored, and he does have some stripes that do make him stand out a lot different from, say, the rat snakes and the racers. So they're not quite found statewide. I don't see them nearly as often as rats and racers. They tend to be pretty heavy in York County for whatever reason. We on our volunteer to get the king snake. So yeah, they are apparently immune from venom, so they can pretty much say, "Copperhead, you're hitting my belt." There's not a whole lot you can do about it. You can try to bite me, but yeah, you're going down the belt. So this is one of the animals that when you hear about black snakes being good, these are one of the good ones because what a lot of people consider good is because they eat other snakes. So, he's got one. He's just lather out there. Yeah. I didn't realize I had them back to back like that. That was a good segue from snake eaters. Tom, anything else on these? Tend to be a little bit smaller than black rat snakes and racers.
A lot of times they're nicknamed, they're also known as chain kings. It's kind of exhibited here. You might see these on the side of the road and not really notice them. It may look like just a section of somebody's discarded chain. In different parts of the state, they have these white bands on them, particularly down in the southeastern portion of the Chesapeake area. The bands on these eastern kings are much thicker. So some of them I've seen, it almost looks like a California banded king. There's just as much black as there is white going down the whole entire snake. In other portions of the state,
in contrast, we have a subspecies that Niagara tells you that they tend to be more black with a lot less of white banded.
Do you have any idea where you got, or did you get these two pictures? It's almost look like photos that I might have taken of some of mine at one point, years and years
I'm sure
ago.
I stole it.
Yeah, okay, I don't care. It's fine.
Just trying to show, there you go. He's a pretty good representative. You see he's a whole lot smaller and a whole lot thinner than the rats. They do get bigger than that, but I like to think that their pattern is a lot easier to tell than some of the vague patterns that the black rats would have.
Generally fairly docile snakes too.
Yeah.
I've never really seen a ferocious eastern king snake.
Yeah, these are also very popular pets, just like the rat snakes. They're pretty popular in the pet trade, and various other closely related subspecies are very popular. A lot of the ones we've seen have been, a lot of the ones you see around here are all related. If you look for that link for pelvis and signs up in the viper room, you can see they've got them up there.
They'll do the tail.
Oh yeah.
They'll do the rattle tail also.
So this one is pretty common. They eat fish and frogs. They have a checkerboard pattern on their back, although they can be a lot of different colors. This one was from Virginia Beach. Yeah, it's like Christmas right there. So they're pretty common, and they're also, they can be a little bit defensive when you first encounter them, but they can settle down once you capture them. So they're pretty good, and they're definitely on the smaller side compared to some of the larger snakes we've seen. I also want to emphasize that we do have some other completely harmless animals. These guys might give you an open mouth threat, but they really can't even break the skin. They're insect eaters. Unfortunately, cats do a big number on these, killing them. And also insecticides, they wind up eating insects that have been exposed to insecticides. So the numbers on these guys have gone downhill. I think a lot of herpetologists will agree, especially in Virginia, that you can go for years without seeing these, and then you might just be, as happened to me, I took a break in the shade standing beside a bush, and there was one sitting there the whole time. Had I walked on, I never would have seen them. So I'd imagine that they're out there, you just can't see them very easily. And I want to get into even some of the smaller snakes. Not all of them are big and showy like the ones that you've seen here. We have a lot of snakes native to Virginia that are 2 feet and under. I think about 10 species or so. This one is pretty common if you go to flip any logs, especially halfway rotted logs. These are, they pretty much specialize in eating worms. They tend to have just a black dot for an eye because they spend most of their time underground. Yeah, see your question? Because well, it's cooler or sometimes warmer. It's also not as dry, and that's sometimes where their food is. If they're trying to eat worms, you know, worms are crawling up trees, so they have to go where the worms are. They also are called worm snakes because they look a lot like them. I mean, their patterns look just like a worm pretty much. So, and this is a very, very common snake. And with the Herp Society and all the emails we got in 2013, this was one of the most common ones that we got asked about. I have no idea why we had a search this particular year. They're very, these are completely harmless. You can pick these up. You might get pooped on. That's going to be the worst thing about it. But they're very tolerant of human habitation and big city type stuff. We had a meeting up at the DC Zoo, and someone decided to flip a log right outside the meeting space. We're in DC, and we're able to find a wild snake. They're also known for living in New York City. So somehow they're able to get around, and they're eating bugs and worms and slugs. They're able to really tolerate a lot of activity.
And that's about full-grown size too. On the leaves there, they are very large earthworm size, about as big as they get.
For some reason, a lot of people, when they're raking leaves, they'll find these. Ringneck snakes are kind of neat. I kind of wanted to show you how, this guy, you would never think just looking at it. He's mostly this plain gray with a little band right here. But then when you flip them over, they have that bright coloration. So there's a lot to appreciate about our native snakes, just because you don't see everything going on with them. If you were to get them in your hand and flip them over, then yeah, there's something interesting about them. So we have a couple of, and they sometimes will be red or orangish color, and we have a couple of different subspecies that integrate, and I don't even bother trying to figure out. That's a ringneck. That's pretty good. So that's the end of the presentation. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
In the slide before this, what was the difference to the penguin?
Those are the eggs. I've already gone an hour. There's a lot more I can say about snakes. About half the snakes we have in Virginia actually give live birth, and the other half lay eggs. It's really kind of interesting how they have both systems. So these happen to be ringneck snakes, ringneck snake eggs, and I found some flipping a log one time and took them back, and we hatched them out, and they're cute as a button and let them go. So you can find these. For some reason, a lot of people, I've heard about people finding snake eggs of ringnecks more frequently than any others, other than turtle eggs. Yes, ma'am.
What is the most popular
as far as what people like, or what is,
Like any kind of snake.
People like
or ones you're most likely to find?
Yeah.
Most likely to find.
It's kind of tough.
It is.
I would say the black rat and the black racer.
Yeah.
But if you're out in the woods flipping logs and actually looking at stuff, you might find some of these a lot more frequent, like the worm snake. On some of our surveys, we found 40 in a single day, so it matters where you're looking. But the larger black snakes, I would say, are the ones people most likely see. And if you're around ponds and streams, you're going to see the northern water snake are very common. Yes, ma'am.
What has been your most favorite field experience?
I didn't know I was in an interview.
Oh, I just thought it was probably a really cool story.
Tom, you got one? I can't. I got one on a survey where one guy went to flip a log and slipped and he just tumbled over backwards and we all pointed at him and laughed. And then you got the, you got to pick up some of these snakes and they're long tubular things and they can fling their bodies, and I was telling you about you can get pooped on. They also have musk, very foul smelling chemical, which is not good. And there's always a story about someone who gets some of it flung right into their mouth or into their eye or something like that. So, yes, ma'am.
The kind of snakes that climb trees, can they like jump off of it?
I wouldn't say that they jump. They might fall. Like the northern water snakes, they'll climb out over water and bask, and if someone scares them, they just go whoop, right into the water. So yeah, I don't think any of our native ones jump. There are some other snakes that can jump and kind of glide.
That's other parts of the world, though.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
So the venomous snakes are the ones that have the slits, and the non-venomous are round eyes. Besides that, because that might be hard to see, is there any other real easy telltale signs of snakes that you shouldn't approach?
Well, yeah. For instance, going back to the tails, the copperheads and the water moccasins both, through their teenage years, are going to retain that bright yellow tail. So that's another thing to go into.
I've always heard that if you sneak up behind them, they can shake pepper onto the tail, and they don't do anything, then it's venomous. But if you're to find I've literally heard one of these stories we always hear every year. I was like, have you tried it? No, I haven't tried it. If you find a snake shed and you want to know what it is, especially if you have the tail section, there is a difference in the number of the rows of scales on the bottom of the tail, venomous versus non-venomous. But for the most part, when you find a snake shed, it's almost always going to be a black rat snake. Occasionally some racers, but I don't think I've ever come across a copperhead shed in the wild. I'm sure some people have. But
How old is this snake live?
I do know that Three Lakes Nature Center in Henrico had a eastern king snake that was verified they had it for 41 years. So I think the longevity of reptiles and amphibians in general is grossly underestimated. When we have frogs, and especially salamanders, that will live 30 years in captivity, I don't. As long as you're being taken care of, they'll keep on chugging. They keep growing ever so slightly. So. All right, we're going to go and call it since we've been about an hour. Thank you very much.
Thank you.